there, my name's Phil Williams and I would like to welcome you to Audio Angling, the podcast site of fishingfilmsandfacts.co.uk. I was sat in the other night watching Countrywise on BBC TV and was surprised to see a feature on the River Yarrow very close to where I live, showing off work done by a group known as Friends of the River Yarrow, or FRY, as an object lesson in reversing urban neglect to produce a shining example of restoration, quite literally from running sewer to running salmon. The interviewee in this case was angler and conservationist John Bamford, who lives probably no more than 10 minutes up the road from me. So, after a swift bit of online research, I was able to both track down and make contact with John, culminating in us both getting our heads together here today to talk through the river's progress back to full health and a thriving mixed fishery, thanks to the varied skills and persistence of what is at the end of the day a voluntary group with a wide range of vested interests. Whether it will stay that way, slip back, or even improve is down to both the continued hard work of the group and the agenda, some of which is up for discussion here. But first things first. Give us a bit of a history behind the river itself, leading up to the dissatisfaction of those individuals willing to fight and work on its behalf.
Right, well, I was born in this area. I've lived only a matter of miles from the River Yarrow. I'm now 69, and I remember the River Yarrow as it was, a glistening silver stream running through pleasant pasture land. Lots of fishing, roach, dates, perch. I used to go fishing with my father, and it was a lovely, lovely river. And then, unfortunately, industrialisation at the top of the river via Black Brook was terribly polluted, and within months it killed all the fish. It just became an open sewer. The river changed colours on a number of times. It would be black, green, blue, whatever they were using in the dye works, and that was what was coming through the river. Nobody seemed to take a lot of interest, unfortunately. Obviously people were too busy and there wasn't a lot of, central government push for the environment, etc. It was more to do with employment and people and money. And it just went down and down and down. And as I say, I've lived within 2 or 3 miles all my life, and I know the river and I know what it used to be like, and it was heartbreaking to see it degenerate into virtually an open sewer.
Presumably, before the pollution effectively split it into 2 separate environments roughly either side of the M61 motorway, fish would have been distributed throughout its entire length in a typical gradation, starting with trout and bullheads in the upland regions draining the edge of the Pennine Moors, through to the lowland agricultural areas of the Lancashire plain, with Chorley, which was after all the main point source of pollution, sandwiched somewhere in between.
Well, when I was a young boy, there was trouting, but not a lot of trout. The trout would tend to be at the top end of the Yarrow. Basically, there were bullheads, perch, roach, dace, and chub. Those were the main species. And, of course, we got a lot of eels going up the river, which was nice to see. But as I say, that all got destroyed with the pollution. So those were the main types. From the junction of the Black Brook and the Yarrow, that's where the trout were. Following that down, it was, as I said, chub, dace, roach, perch, all beautiful fish, eels, and plenty of wildlife. Dippers, kingfishers, herons, water hens, coots. It was a living river.
And as you got further downstream closer to where it joins the River Douglas, let's not forget the old Mill Cove at Croston too, where as a kid I used to fish for flounders below the weir.
Yes, that's right. And in fact, skipping 50 years now, there's a lot of flounders down at that area, down at Mill Cove, and there's some lovely chub up to £4, £5, really, really big fish. And that's nice to see, but they do catch flounders at Mill Cove.
During my time at the Environment Agency, I well remember visiting quite a wide range of industrial and agricultural premises on the Upper Yarra catchment throughout the 1990s, some culminating in prosecutions, and always triggered by complaints from members of the public. So people have been vocally unhappy about the state of the river and its tribs for quite a long time, which presumably is what led to the formation of Friends of the Yarrow back in the year 2000.
Well, as I say, from the 1950s up through to the 1980s, it was in a poor state. It was only when the old River Board came into existence they started to get a little bit of teeth to prosecute, etc. This is where you will come in, presumably.
Well, prior to 1989, North West Water Authority ran the whole show, at which point it was broken up into the treatment delivery side and my employer, the National Rivers Authority, which would later become a part of the Environment Agency.
Well, prior to that, you know yourself, there was very little enforcement going on. And what happened was, when I retired, the river was cleaning up then through industrial closure, really. The main pollutants at the top of the Yarrow closed down, and the old pollution was beginning to subside. All the dye works and carpet factories, etc., closed down, which was a natural process for the river to start cleaning itself up. And how I got involved was, on the River Yarrow, there were 4 major weirs. One at Milco, one at Pincock, one at Burkacre, and one at Duxbury. Now, fish could ascend the ones at Milco and at Pincock if there was a big flood, and sea trout and salmon could ascend that. However, they couldn't get past Burkacre because that's a 12-foot weir. And I'd only been retired out a few weeks, and I was down on the river with my brothers. We were having a walk one Saturday morning, it was. It was in autumn, and we'd heard tales of fish trying to leap the weir, and we were there, and lo and behold, there was this salmon. I would estimate between 6 to 8 pound. Lovely fresh silver salmon trying to get up this impossible pass, this weir. They kept just banging on the rocks and falling down and banging again. And I thought, oh gosh, what a state. And of course the river was clean enough then to enable fish to live in the water. So anyway, I reported it to the Environmental Agency when I got home. And they reported it to a chap called Mr. Mike Callery, who was one of the founding members of Fry, Friends of the River Yarrow. This was in 2001. I'd never heard of Fry. In fact, it'd only been going a matter of weeks. But they'd obviously made contact with the Environmental Agency and see how they could improve the river. So Mike Callery phoned me up and said he was most interested in what I'd seen and would I come to a meeting that we're having to explain. And there was only 3 or 4 of us at the meeting because it was embryonic at that stage. So I told him what I'd seen, and they told me what they were planning for the river. And I immediately got involved, and I've been a keen member, committee member ever since. And what we've done is we've built 4 fish passes, one at Pincock, one at Milco, one at Burkacre, and one at Duxbury. Over a matter of 4 years, we built those fish passes. We got funding from the Lancashire Environmental Fund and joint funding with the Environmental Agency. And we, with the aid of the Environmental Agency, got these fish passes installed, got them passed by the Environmental Agency as fit for purpose. And we've continued to clean up the Yarrow by buffer stripping. We've buffer stripped some 20 miles of the river and planted over 5,000 trees, which all helps the environmental corridor that the river is and watch the river come back to life. We've got a very keen membership that reports any pollution, and slowly the river's come back to life. Not quite to its former glory, but I would say we're 80% there.
And for those that may not know, can you explain a little more about the practicalities and disadvantages of buffer stripping?
If there's no fence along the river and the farmer has cattle and sheep on the bank, then they wander into the river and erode the bank, eat any wildlife, any flowers that are growing there. So what we've done in conjunction with the farmers, and they've been very, very helpful, we've negotiated a strip of land which is approximately 3 metres from the water's edge, and we've put new fencing along and planted trees. So the farm animals can't get down to the river. So consequently, there's a lot of wildflowers, wild grass seeds, etc. growing there, which helps to clean the river and also prevent bank erosion by the farm animals. And along that buffer stripping, we've planted over 5,000 trees, again to hold the bank in situ and to help with the wildlife, the owls, the bats, all the wildlife that's associated with trees. And we've now got voles and what have you in the undergrowth. There's no animals eat it, so if you go down in summer, it's 2 and 3 foot high, plenty of wildlife in there. And as I said, we've had very, very good cooperation with the farmers because they're getting a new fence. Again, this was joint funded by the EA and the Lancashire Environmental Fund. Yeah, we've had a good response from the farmers.
I interviewed Mike Weaver from the Wild Trout Trust recently, And it sounds to me that like what you're doing locally is very similar to what they're trying to promote on a national basis, including the Trout in the Town project run in our area by Dr. Paul Gaskell, who I've also recorded an interview with for this archive. But would I be right in thinking that when you have a group formed such as Friends of the Yarrow, with possibly a more diverse agenda, defining the important objectives might not be as clear-cut? So how do you go about getting a consensus view?
A good question. It's mainly done by word of mouth. As a group, we have one overriding objective, and that is to improve the environment of the river. And there's no hidden agenda by anybody, by any committee member. They're all focused on improving the water quality of the river and its immediate environment. So there are no issues there. With regards to funding, we used to get a lot of funding from the Lancashire Environmental Fund, LEF, and the EA. Unfortunately, due to the cutbacks, our funding has dried up somewhat. But in saying that, our major projects are completed with regards to buffer stripping, tree planting, and the fish passes. There are one or two other instances where we need to take action. At the top of the river, there's a brook called Ella Brook that runs through Adlington and comes under the Wigan Road, Wigan Lane, and it skirts past the old workings of the mine, Ellerback coal mine, which has been closed for a number of years now, 30, 40 years. But what's happening is there's a lot of leaching coming out of the old pit rocks, slag heaps, whatever you want to call them, and it's leaching into Ella Brook, which trickles down into the Yarrow, and is one of our major sources of pollution yet. Now, we've done quite a lot of work on that with regard to the Coal Authority. If you cast your mind back to the NCB, National Coal Board, they owned all that land. But central government, in the wisdom, decreed that all local authorities should buy these slag heaps, and Chorley Borough Council was forced to buy Ellerbeck. Consequently, there was no central funding to clean up these slag heaps. So Chorley Borough Council is left with this slag heap that is leaching heavy metals, etc., into the water. The NCB is now defunct. It's called the Coal Authority. We contacted the Coal Authority and they've been very good. They've been up and done surveys, and we've got plans to build a big reed bed. At the base, we were going to dissipate the water from the river and plant a big reed bed, inflow and outflow, and the reed beds would purify or take a lot of the nasties out of the water. And we'd costed it all up, and it was going to cost something like 120,000 to put this reed bed in and to get it working properly. And we were just on the point of going ahead with it. We got £10,000 from Chorley Borough Council, and we got the remaining 110,000 from the LEF and the Environmental Agency. Then the money was pulled from the Environmental Agency, and it just collapsed with no money to go forward. But that is still on the agenda, and it's still on the books with the Environmental Agency. But just at present, there's no funding. I mean, the Environmental Agency has taken a bigger hit this time on government cutbacks than any other department. I think they've had 9 or 10% reduction in the budget. And the LEF have been running short of money because, again, of central funding. That's come down. So that is one of our main issues to get resolved. But at present, we have no funding, but we keep on with the Environmental Agency in the form of Darren Wilson, who's the fisheries officer, who's been a godsend to Friends of the River Yarrow. He has really been, how can we say, one of the main drivers for the Environmental Agency to make sure that we get the funding. And he's keeping his eye open for any pots of money that come. There is a list of pollution projects, and we're on that list, and he's doing his best to get some money. But at present, we can't get any money. It's not only a too detrimental effect on the Yarrow, but it does need addressing. And while we're on with pollution, we've had major cooperation by United Utilities. At present, there are 22 outflows into the Yarrow of storm overflows, but United Utilities, in the process, they've got a 5-year plan of spending almost £7 million in cleaning up the River Yarrow. They've just undertaken a major one at Charnock Richard to clean up Clanket Brook. I don't know what that project cost, but I would imagine it's substantial. they have committed 6.5 million to 7 million to clean up the Yarrow. So that is another major step. Unfortunately, the funding hasn't been pulled on that because it's a private company and it's part of their Water Frame Directive project. And that is a major, major step by United Utilities. Because what used to happen with various tributaries of the Yarrow, if there was a flood, the Suez couldn't take it and it used to go into the Yarrow. But now they're making major storm overflows. The one in Charnock, I think I'm right in saying it's 8,000 square metres of overflow it'll take before a drop goes into Clanket Brook, which means that there's no sewage now going into Clanket Brook, which goes into the Yarrow. So that will clean up of its own accord as time progresses. But that is now in operation, the new storage tanks.
I well remember locking horns with United Utilities on a number of occasions regarding the storm sewer overflow to the River Yarrow in Astley Park, and also at the sewage works just down the way, both of which would ultimately end up polluting the Yarrow. So let's be clear-cut here about all the big water companies. It isn't necessarily the case that they want to help, rather that they feel a need to help just to keep themselves within the law.
Oh yeah, they have their guidelines and restrictions of what they're allowed to pump in, but we have a good authority. Friends of the River Yarrow hadn't been pressure pointing United Utilities, that money would have gone elsewhere. And we're just grateful that they have put the money into cleaning up the Yarrow even more. And it will benefit in the next 5 to 6 years. The river will be even cleaner than what it is now. And it's really clean now. So yeah, we can only thank United Utilities. And again, we've got a very good person, a lady called Claire Mallard, who is very, very keen. She attends all our committee meetings and she's very proactive in pushing forward the clean-up of the Yarrow. And as I said, the fish that are running up the Yarrow now is tremendous. We get sea trout, loads of brown trout, because the brown trout are indigenous to the Yarrow because they survived because they were above the pollution. And what's happened now is the river's got clean, the trout have moved further down, the coarse fish have moved further up, and it is a real gem to see all the fish that are in there. You can go to Townbridge in Cross and look over, and you'll see shoals of chub, up to £4, tremendous fish. And all along the Yarra Valley Park, in summer and spring, you can see trout topping, taking flies, the kingfish up and down, the dippers. It really is a success story, and it's due to Friends of the River Yarrow, Charley Council, United Utilities and the Environmental Agency, all working with the same objective of cleaning up the river.
Water quality aside now, what other physical improvements are there in the pipeline, such as approved structural alterations, or creating pools, riffles and other in-river habitat variations?
Well, we've no plans to create any riffles because there's plenty in existence. We just have to keep well in with the farmers to make sure that the fencing is kept up to speed, planting trees when we think it's necessary. We have just done a big project in the last 2 years at a farm called Allshaw Green Farm, where we'd done the buffer stripping. We hadn't planted the trees, fortunately. We'd done the fencing, and during the winter of 2010-2011, major flood washed all our fencing away. About 20, 30, 40 metres of fencing came away. We had to get the Environmental Agency to come down and say, this is what we're wanting to do. We wanted to divert the river because it was coming down and it was turning a right angle on its flow, and that right angle was just eating away into the field because it was very, very sandy. So what we did was, it cost us about £3,000, and Fry paid for that. We altered the course of the river. We took the bend off, basically, and now it's just a little S shape which would glide through. Once that had been done, we graded the bank at 45 degrees, as the Environmental Agency had suggested, reseeded it and planted trees. And that again is a success story. So anything like that, we're onto it. All the fish passes are done now, it's just a matter of maintaining them. There are no more obstacles to stop migratory fish going up, so all that's done. Our future now is to make sure that we keep people's awareness of the river, to keep it clean. We need to sort out Ella Brook when we get the funds, so that's a major problem. And then it's just a matter of educating people. What we're going to do next year is start to go around to schools. We have a slideshow that we can put on for the children. We've done 2 or 3 schools, but we're going to do a big drive next year to do more with our present chairman, Mr. Alan Whittaker, who took over from Mike Callery. Mike had done 10 years and he's 82 now, so he felt he'd done his share. And Alan Whittaker stepped into the shoes, and he's doing a good job, a fantastic job in driving it forward. And we have a good committee. John Twin is the treasurer. Then we have 3 or 4 other committee members that are the driving force for Fry. And all of our committee meetings are attended by United Utilities and the Environmental Agency. And together we hope to move forward in unison to keep the river, improve it. Nearly all the buffet stripping's done now, because once you come through to Chorley, it's natural wood anyway, right through to the top end of Duxbury. So it's just a matter of keeping an eye on pollution. The major project is Ellabrook, as I keep saying, and then it's a matter of doing some further project with the schools, telling them about the river, how to keep it clean, etc. And we've got various walks organised for next year, which we do along the river. So it's just a matter of keeping it going and letting everybody enjoy what we've done so far and what we hope to achieve in the future.
And I've absolutely no doubt that people are enjoying it, hence the visit by the BBC and you recalling the story of the leaping salmon which we mentioned earlier. From what you've already said, salmonids are not the only fish of interest here, something we'll come to in a little more detail shortly. But to what extent are the migratory salmonids present, and what of the spawning prospects?
Well, that's the problem. We have sea trout up there. We know because the environmental has done electrofishing and we've got sea trout in the top end of the river. We haven't so far found any salmon parr. That's not to say that there are none there. The salmon are quite capable of getting up because, as I say, in 2001 I saw a salmon 6 to 8 pound trying to get up. But so far we haven't seen any salmon. Now, what the Environmental Agency said, if there's no salmon in the next few years, we might seed the river, we might put some fry in and see what they do. Hopefully they will succeed in the river. But we just want to get it a little bit cleaner yet before we take that action. But that is one of the plans, to put some salmon in.
To me, that's always going to be a worry, as it could affect the genetic integrity of any true Yarrow salmon that might actually make it through.
We would be guided with the Environmental Agency. They would presumably get the salmon fry from the Ribble, which is the mother river of the Yarrow. So they would be indigenous to the Yarrow. Going back in history, some of those salmon would run the Yarrow anyway. So it's not as though we're taking salmon from, say, the Tweed and inviting them into they would be taken from the Ribble, which is the mother river, and seeded into the Yarrow. But that has got a lot of dots and crosses to do before we get to that stage. We're hoping that some salmon will find their way up, as the sea trout have, because the sea trout couldn't get up 10 years ago, and now we've literally hundreds of sea trout going up to 4 pound, jumping up the fish pass. So that is a success story, and you know as well as I do. If sea trout are going up, salmon will follow. Now that's a double-edged sword, that would be great, but also it could increase the amount of poaching and illegal. We have had salmon up. I wasn't going to mention it, but I'll tell you. We had 3 salmon in the Duxbury Fish Pass, and somebody went with a pitchfork and took them out. We don't broadcast the salmon element of it because they get cloudy eyes when they think of salmon. Unfortunately, we couldn't prosecute the person. Environmental Agency have said that if they can just catch somebody taking a salmon, then they would come down hard. This year, there could be salmon up there. We just don't know. The Environmental Agency do a survey every June to see if there are any salmon parr up there, but so far we haven't found any.
Picking up now on what you said about the Ribble being the mother river for the Yarrow, what a lot of people probably won't realise is that at least one source of coarse fish in the system, and possibly even the main reseeding source, was actually put there by me back in the 1990s, when the clean-up was just starting to get underway, with, fortuitously, fish from the Ribble catchment collected as brood stock for the then National Rivers Authority rearing project, which I worked on to produce large numbers of chub, dace and barbel for introduction purposes, as and when rivers like the Yarrow cleaned up. And after keeping those fish in quarantine, then stripping them at the fish farm, many were released into the River Lostock, which connects to the Yarrow upstream of any tidal limits that might otherwise prevent them spreading in from elsewhere.
Well, as I say, if anyone wants to see any fish, take a walk along the Yarrow. To see big chub, go and stand on the town bridge with a piece of bread. And of course, if you go to Yarrow Valley Park, stand on one of the bridges and throw bread in, you'll see the chub come up, and the trout. it's gratifying to see it come to life. And as I say, I'll reiterate, Chorleywood Council, United Utilities and the Environmental Agency and Fry have all worked hand in hand with local landowners to improve the river.
Getting fish back into a river is one thing. Keeping them there and improving their habitat to ensure they thrive can be another matter altogether. So what are your organisation's current and future plans in that regard?
Well, again, as I say, we have an active membership and they'll report any pollution, any trees falling into the river. But we always contact Darren from the Environmental Agency if we've got an obstruction, and he'll advise us along with the biodiversity group, as it's called, whether the trees should come out of the river, is it causing a problem. But normally we leave the trees as they are because it's a good source of food. So unless it is causing a major problem, we will leave the tree where it is. Because again, the river is dynamic and trees do fall in rivers, and the amount of insects and grubs that live on those trees is all food for the fish and the birds. So if it is a problem, then we get in touch with the Environmental Agency and see what we can do to release the obstruction, if they deem to think it is. We've had a few fall down in Duxbury. We've had a look at it with the Environmental Agency and we've said, no, it's not really causing a problem. But the main thing is keeping on top of pollution and going forward, trying to clean up the river even more. United Utilities have said they've got a 5-year programme, not only stopping with what they've done now, but there's 5 or 6 major projects to clean up the river. And any pollution is reported straight away.
And I know that from the diverse interest base of groups like Friends of the Yarrow, fish will not be the only wildlife success that you and your members will have been responsible for. So is there not sometimes a conflict of interests here? A balanced, diverse flora and fauna is how things should be. But as soon as some species arrive, others can start to suffer, such as fish from otters and even more so from mink, which not only kill fish but also small mammals. Any problems there? And if so, how are you going about managing those?
No, not really. We have had mink on the river, but also we've got otters. And otters chase off mink. I have seen mink, but I haven't seen any for the last 3 years. Now we know that otters eat fish, but there's plenty of fishing. There is quite a good run actually of eels in the Yarrow. I know when we built the Burkacre Fish Pass in 2001, we opened it and it was functioning, but unfortunately there was a problem with the top pot of the fish pass. The fish pass is a group of pots going higher and higher and higher, like locks on a canal. And the top pot was beginning to erode. We hadn't got enough concrete in. So we shut the fish pass off and we set about putting another, I think of something like 5 cubic metres of concrete in, which is a lot of concrete. And the other pots were still full of water, but there was no water flowing through them. And we thought we'd just have a look to see what fish were in the pots. And we got something like 30 or 40 elder in the pots. The fish pass had only been open 2 or 3 weeks, and we got all those elder in. And it was unbelievable, the number of elders that were in those pots. So there was quite a good run of elder.
And eels are a protected and endangered species throughout Europe now.
Exactly, and we feel as though we're helping them as well, because they're coming up the Yarrow, and long may it continue. So what's gone wrong with the eels, I don't know, but as I say, in 2001, there was up to